The Apache beauty said. My clothes were washed away by the water, the rancher said. Take my shirt. The river had always been calm in this season, or at least that was what people believed. It flowed quietly between the trees, reflecting the sky like a long silver ribbon. But nature had its own plans that day. The water rose without warning, fed by distant rain in the mountains, turning gentle currents into fast-moving force. She reached the river just before sunset. The Apache woman had been traveling since morning, moving carefully through familiar land. She knew this territory well. Her people had walked these paths long before fences, roads, or ranch boundaries existed. Still, even knowledge could not always protect someone from sudden change. She planned to cross the river quickly, the way she had done many times before. Her clothes and small bundle were tied neatly, meant to stay dry as she waded across. At first, everything seemed normal. Then the ground beneath her feet shifted. The water pushed harder than expected, pulling at her legs. She tried to move forward, but the river grabbed her belongings. In one sharp moment, the bundle slipped from her hands and vanished into the rushing current. She reached for it, but the river was stronger. Within seconds, the water took everything she carried, dragging it far downstream. She managed to reach the bank, breathless and shaken. Cold air hit her skin as she stood there, realizing what had happened. The river had not only taken her supplies, it had taken her clothes as well. What remained was torn, soaked, and useless. She wrapped her arms around herself, not from shame, but from the sharp cold that settled deep into her bones. For a moment, she stood still. She did not cry out. She did not panic. Her face showed shock, yes, but also control. She had been raised to survive. Fear was something to acknowledge, not something to let rule you. Still, the situation was dangerous. Night was coming. The land grew quiet except for the sound of the river continuing as if nothing had happened. She moved back from the water and searched for cover among the trees. Nearby, beyond a line of cottonwoods, stood a wide stretch of grazing land. Fences marked the edge of a working ranch. The rancher who owned the land was finishing his day, unaware that fate was moving toward him. He had lived alone for years. The rancher was not a man of many words. His life followed a steady rhythm: sunrise, work, sunset, rest. He had learned early that land demanded attention and respect. He fixed fences, checked cattle, and listened to the weather more closely than most people listen to other humans. That evening, he noticed something unusual. The cattle near the river were restless. Animals sense change long before humans did. He tightened his coat and walked toward the fence line, eyes scanning the trees. That was when he saw movement that did not belong to deer or livestock. Someone was there. He slowed his steps, careful not to startle whoever it was. Out here, people did not wander without reason. As he got closer, he realized it was a woman, standing partly hidden by branches, clearly in distress. He stopped immediately. The rancher was raised with strict values: respect first, questions later. He turned his head slightly, giving her space, and spoke calmly so she would not feel threatened. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She hesitated before answering. Her voice, when it came, was steady but tired. She explained simply that the river had risen fast and taken her belongings. She did not exaggerate. She did not ask for help. She only stated what had happened. "My clothes were washed away by the water," she said. The words hung in the air. The rancher understood at once how serious the situation was. There was no judgment in his face, no confusion. Only concern. Night was falling and the temperature would drop quickly. Leaving her there was not an option. Without stepping closer than necessary, he removed his outer shirt and held it out, turning his body away to respect her privacy. "Take my shirt," he said. It was not a dramatic moment, no grand gesture, just a simple action driven by decency. The shirt was warm, worn from years of work, carrying the smell of sun, dust, and clean sweat. She accepted it with a quiet nod, wrapping it around herself. For the first time since the river incident, her shoulders relaxed. They stood in silence for a few seconds, listening to the water and the wind through the trees. Two strangers, brought together by chance, standing on land that had stories older than both of them. The rancher then pointed toward his house in the distance, visible as a dark shape against the fading sky. He explained there was shelter, warmth, and dry blankets there. He made it clear there was no pressure, only an offer of safety. She considered his words carefully. Trust was not given lightly. Her people had learned that lesson through generations, but she also knew danger when she saw it, and this man showed none. His posture was open. His voice never rose. He waited for her decision without pushing. Finally, she agreed. They walked with space between them, neither rushing nor slowing. The ranch land stretched wide and quiet, the earth firm underfoot. As they walked, the rancher noticed how she moved, confident, observant, aware of her surroundings despite exhaustion. He respected that. By the time they reached the house, darkness had settled fully. He opened the door and stepped aside, letting her enter first. Inside, the space was simple: wooden furniture, clean floors, a place built for function rather than display. He lit a small fire and brought out a blanket, placing it where she could reach it without crossing close paths. He poured water and left it on the table. Still, few words were spoken. The weight of the day lingered between them, not awkward but thoughtful. This was not the beginning of a romance or a dramatic rescue story. It was a moment of humanity, of one person helping another without expecting anything in return. Outside, the river continued its endless journey, unaware of the quiet change it had caused. And as the fire crackled softly, both the Apache woman and the rancher understood that some encounters, though brief, left a mark far deeper than time. The night passed slowly, not because of fear, but because both of them were awake with thoughts they did not speak aloud. The small ranch house was quiet except for the soft sound of the fire and the wind brushing against the walls. Outside, the land rested under darkness, wide and still. She sat near the fire, wrapped in the blanket and the rancher's shirt. The warmth slowly returned to her body, but her mind stayed alert. She had learned long ago that safety was something you observed carefully, not something you assumed. Even in a kind place, she stayed aware of every sound, every movement. The rancher stayed on the other side of the room, giving her space. He sat on a wooden chair, hands resting on his knees, staring into the fire. He was not pretending to sleep. He wanted her to know she was not alone, but also that he would not cross any line. Time passed like that. After a while, he stood up quietly and added another piece of wood to the fire. The light flickered across the room, touching old photographs on the wall, family members, long gone and moments frozen in time. The woman noticed them but did not ask. Some stories were not meant for strangers. She finally broke the silence. "The river changes fast," she said calmly. He nodded. "It does. Even after all these years, it still surprises me." Her words were not small talk. They were a shared understanding. Nature did not care who you were or where you came from. It treated everyone the same. He brought her a simple meal, bread, warm soup, nothing fancy. He placed it on the table and stepped back. She accepted it with a quiet thank you and ate slowly. Every movement showed control and dignity, even after what she had been through. As she ate, he spoke a little about the land. He explained how the ranch had been in his family for generations, how he learned to read weather patterns by watching the sky instead of listening to reports. He did not speak proudly, just honestly. She listened. When it was her turn, she spoke about her journey. She did not give many details, but she shared enough to show purpose. She was returning from visiting distant family, walking paths her ancestors once traveled freely. Her words carried respect for the past and strength in the present. The rancher listened carefully. He did not interrupt. He did not question her choices. He only nodded when understanding came. Later, he showed her a small room where she could rest. It was clean and simple, with a bed, fresh sheets, and a window that looked out toward the open land. He left the door open slightly and told her he would be in the main room if she needed anything. Before leaving, he placed folded clothes on a chair. They were clean and practical, chosen carefully so she could remain comfortable and covered when morning came. He explained they belonged to a relative who no longer lived there. She thanked him again, this time meeting his eyes. Trust did not appear suddenly. It formed quietly, like the slow return of warmth after cold. When she was alone, she sat on the bed and finally allowed herself to breathe deeply. The events of the day replayed in her mind: the river's pull, the sudden loss, the shock of standing with nothing left but her strength. She had faced worse in life, but this moment had reminded her how quickly control could disappear. Still, she was safe now. Outside, the rancher stepped onto the porch and looked at the stars. The sky was clear, filled with countless lights. He had lived under this sky his entire life, yet nights like this still made him feel small in a good way. Helping someone was not something he thought much about. It was simply what needed to be done. As dawn approached, the land slowly changed color. The darkness softened and pale light touched the hills. Birds began to move. The world prepared for another day. She woke early. She dressed quietly in the clothes he left and folded the blanket neatly. When she stepped into the main room, the rancher was already awake, making coffee. He greeted her with a simple nod, nothing more. They shared breakfast in silence, comfortable this time. The tension from the night before had eased. Daylight revealed more details, the lines of hard work on his hands, the calm strength in her posture. After eating, he asked about her plans. She explained that her community was not far, but crossing the river again without supplies would be risky. The water was still high. She would need to take a longer route. He thought for a moment, then offered to drive her closer to a safer crossing point used during heavy water seasons. He made it clear that it was no trouble. She considered again. Accepting help was not weakness, but she believed in balance. She agreed, but only after offering to help with small tasks before leaving. He tried to refuse, but she insisted. Contribution mattered to her. They spent the morning working side by side, simple things, nothing heavy. She helped organize supplies, swept the porch, and assisted with tasks that required careful attention rather than strength. They spoke more naturally now, exchanging small thoughts, observations about the land, the weather, the animals. There was no rush. By midday, they prepared to leave. The rancher brought her belongings he had managed to recover from the river's edge, small items caught in branches downstream. It was not much, but it mattered. She accepted them with appreciation. The drive was quiet but not uncomfortable. The land passed by slowly, wide and open. When they reached the safer crossing, he stopped the truck and stepped out, giving her space again. They stood by the road for a moment. She thanked him, not with dramatic words but with sincerity. She told him his kindness would be remembered. He responded simply, saying he hoped the rest of her journey would be safe. There were no promises made, no expectations formed. She walked away with steady steps, turning once to look back. He raised his hand slightly, then watched until she disappeared into the distance. As he drove back to the ranch, the house felt quieter than before. Not lonely, just changed. The land remained the same, the work unchanged, but something subtle had shifted. For her, the journey continued, but she carried with her a reminder. That respect could exist between strangers, that help could come without conditions, and that even in moments of loss, dignity could remain untouched. Neither of them knew if they would ever meet again. But both knew the encounter would stay with them for a long time. The days that followed moved forward, but neither of them returned fully to the rhythm they had before. Life continued, yet something small and steady had changed inside both of them, like a stone placed gently in water, sending quiet ripples outward. For the rancher, the land felt the same but sounded different. He still woke before sunrise, still checked the fences, still counted the cattle as they moved slowly across the fields. but his thoughts drifted more than usual. Sometimes, when he walked near the river, he found himself listening more closely, watching the water with a deeper respect. He knew how quickly it could change now, not because he had read it somewhere, but because he had seen the cost it could take. He thought about the woman often, though not in a way that distracted him from his work. It was more like remembering a lesson. Her calm strength stayed with him. She had faced loss without complaint, danger without drama. That kind of strength was rare. At night, when he sat on the porch, he remembered her quiet voice and the way she chose her words carefully. He did not imagine a future or create stories in his mind. He simply acknowledged that meeting her had reminded him of something important. Kindness mattered most when no one was watching. For her, the journey back to her community was steady but thoughtful. She followed the longer path as planned, staying away from the river until the land rose and the ground became safer. She traveled with care, reading the signs of nature the way she had been taught since childhood. Still, her thoughts returned often to the ranch house, the firelight, and the man who had helped without asking questions. When she reached her people, she was welcomed warmly. They noticed the tiredness in her eyes and asked about her journey. She told them what had happened, not with emotion, but with honesty. She spoke of the river, the sudden change, and the rancher who offered help without hesitation. Her elders listened closely. They did not interrupt. They understood that such moments were not accidents. They were reminders that respect could exist even across unfamiliar paths. One of the elders nodded slowly and said that when kindness was given freely, it carried power far beyond the moment itself. Days passed. She returned to her daily responsibilities, helping family members, preparing food, caring for the land that sustained them. Yet she felt a quiet pull toward reflection. At times she found herself sitting alone, thinking about how easily life could turn, how quickly strength was tested. She did not feel weak about what happened. She felt grateful she had survived it with dignity intact. Meanwhile, the river slowly returned to its calmer state. The water level dropped inch by inch, leaving behind wet earth and broken branches along the banks. The land healed as it always did, but traces of the flood remained, reminders of what had been taken and what had been spared. One afternoon, the rancher rode out to inspect the far end of his property, near where the river curved sharply. As he moved along the bank, he noticed something caught between rocks, a small woven item, worn but intact. He recognized it at once. It belonged to her. He dismounted and picked it up carefully. It was a simple piece, but clearly handmade, carrying meaning beyond its size. He stood there for a long moment, holding it, unsure what to do. Returning it would require finding her again, crossing paths once more. He did not act immediately. That evening, he sat at his table, turning the item in his hands. He thought about whether returning it would be an intrusion or a kindness. He remembered her words, her careful nature, and her belief in balance. Finally, he decided that returning something lost was not crossing a line. It was completing a moment left unfinished. The next morning, he prepared for the trip. He chose a calm pace, not rushing, letting the land guide him. When he reached the edge of her community, he stopped and waited. He did not enter without acknowledgement. Respect mattered too much. She saw him first. From a distance, she recognized his posture, the way he stood without urgency. She felt surprise but not fear. She approached slowly, meeting him halfway. There was a pause before either spoke. He held out the item. "The river gave this back," he said simply. She looked at it, then at him. Her expression softened, not with emotion that overwhelmed her, but with understanding. She accepted it carefully, her fingers brushing the familiar texture. For a moment, words felt unnecessary. "Thank you," she said. "You didn't have to come." He nodded. It felt right. They stood there, surrounded by open land and quiet air. This meeting was different from the first. There was no urgency, no danger, only acknowledgement. They spoke for a while, exchanging updates about the river, the weather, the land. nothing heavy, nothing forced. Their conversation flowed easily, like people who understood when to speak and when to stop. She invited him to sit for tea, a gesture of welcome. He accepted, knowing the meaning behind it. They sat with others nearby, sharing warmth and calm conversation. He did not feel out of place. No one treated him as an outsider, only as a guest. As the sun lowered, he prepared to leave. There was no hesitation this time, no uncertainty about how to part. They had crossed that moment already. Before he went, she spoke quietly. "Kindness travels," she said. "It doesn't end where it begins." He considered her words as he rode back toward his ranch. The land stretched wide before him, familiar and steady, yet it felt richer now, filled with deeper meaning. For her, the return of the lost item felt like closure, not an ending but a completion. She placed it carefully among her belongings, not as a symbol of debt but as a reminder of balance restored. Life continued for both of them. They did not see each other often. Weeks passed, then months. But when storms came, they both watched the river with wiser eyes. When moments of choice appeared, they remembered how simple actions could carry weight. The world did not change dramatically because of their meeting. No legends were written. No promises made. But something quieter happened. Two lives moved forward with a deeper respect for chance, for dignity, and for the power of helping without expectation. And sometimes, that kind of change was the strongest of all. Time moved quietly after that meeting, not rushing, not stopping. Life settled into a steady rhythm again, yet both of them felt more aware of the small moments that often passed unnoticed. The season began to change. Days grew shorter, and the air carried a cooler edge, especially in the mornings and evenings. For the rancher, work increased as winter preparation began. Fences needed checking, supplies needed storing, and animals required closer care. His days were full, his hands busy, but his mind was calm. He felt grounded in a way he had not noticed before. The land felt less like something he owned, and more like something he shared responsibility with. Sometimes, while fixing a fence or riding along the edge of the river, he remembered her words about kindness traveling. He did not repeat them out loud, but they stayed with him. When he helped a neighbor repair a broken gate or guided a lost traveler toward the right road, he did it without thinking much about it. Still, something inside him knew those actions came more easily now. The river remained calm for weeks, flowing gently as if nothing had ever happened, but he never underestimated it again. He marked safer crossings, added small signs for those who passed through, and adjusted his routes. He did not do this for praise or recognition. He did it because it felt right. On her side, life within her community continued with its own steady pace. She took part in daily work, shared meals, and spent time with elders who valued her quiet strength. She listened more than she spoke, absorbing stories and lessons that carried deep meaning. The river incident became something she reflected on privately rather than discussed openly. Yet, she noticed changes in herself too. She paid closer attention to how people offered help and how they accepted it. She saw how pride could sometimes block simple solutions and how humility could open unexpected doors. The rancher's actions had not made her feel small or dependent. Instead, they had reminded her that accepting help could be an act of strength. One afternoon, a storm rolled in faster than expected. Dark clouds gathered and wind swept across the land. The community prepared quickly, securing what needed protection. As rain fell heavily, she found herself watching the sky, listening to the sound of water hitting the ground. Her thoughts returned to the river. She wondered how it was behaving now, whether it had risen again, whether anyone else might face the same danger she once did. Concern settled quietly in her chest. Not fear, awareness. After the storm passed, she spoke with one of the elders about it. The elder listened and then suggested that sometimes, when paths cross for a reason, they remain connected even when people are far apart. not tied but aware of one another. She understood. A few days later, she decided to walk toward the higher ground near the river, staying at a safe distance. She did not go alone. She moved with others, checking the land, observing changes brought by the storm. From afar, she saw that the river had grown stronger but remained within its banks. She felt relieved. Back at the rancher was also watching the weather closely. He had prepared well, but storms always demanded respect. When the rain finally eased, he went out to inspect the land. Everything held steady. Fences remained strong. The animals were calm. As he stood near the riverbank, he thought about how easily things could change and how preparation mattered just as much as reaction. He realized that his choices after meeting her, marking crossings, adjusting habits, had likely made a difference. That realization brought quiet satisfaction. Weeks passed and the land moved toward winter. The colors changed and mornings carried frost. Both of them adapted, adjusting routines without complaint. Life did not feel heavy. It felt meaningful. One evening, the rancher received news that a distant neighbor had fallen ill and needed help with basic tasks. Without hesitation, he went over, spending hours repairing what needed fixing and leaving supplies behind. The neighbor thanked him, surprised. The rancher only shrugged. "Someone once helped me see what mattered," he said, though he did not explain further. At the same time, within her community, she helped guide younger members through seasonal tasks, teaching them how to read signs in the land and respect natural forces. She spoke once about the river, not as a warning filled with fear, but as a lesson about awareness and humility. "Strength is knowing when to move forward," she said, "and when to step back." Those words stayed with the listeners. As winter settled fully, travel became harder. Paths closed and movement slowed. They did not see each other during that time. There were no messages sent, no signals exchanged. Yet neither felt disconnected. Both carried a sense of quiet understanding. The rancher spent long nights indoors, repairing tools, reading old journals left by family members. He noticed how often kindness appeared in those pages, written in simple acts rather than grand moments. He realized that the values he lived by were not new, they were passed down, waiting to be remembered. She spent evenings near the fire with her people, listening to stories passed through generations. She recognized a familiar pattern in them too: survival paired with compassion, independence balanced by community. As winter began to loosen its grip and signs of spring appeared, both felt ready for whatever came next, even if they did not know what that would be. One morning, as the rancher walked toward the river again, he saw that the land was slowly renewing itself. Grass pushed through cold soil. Water flowed steady and clear. He smiled faintly. Far from there, she stood on higher ground, watching the same river from another angle. She felt calm, centered, and grateful, not for what she had lost that day, but for what she had learned. They did not need to meet again for the impact to remain real. Some connections were not meant to continue through presence, but through growth. And both of them had grown, quietly, steadily, without anyone else needing to notice. The river flowed on, carrying reflections of sky and land alike, holding stories within its movement. And in its quiet way, it reminded them both that life's most meaningful moments were often the simplest ones, shaped by respect, choice, and the courage to act with care. Spring arrived slowly, not all at once, but in quiet signs that only careful eyes noticed. The mornings grew softer. The air carried warmth again. Small green shoots appeared where the ground had once been hard and pale. The river flowed steadily now, no longer wild, no longer silent in warning, but calm and clear, as if it had learned something too. For the rancher, this season always meant renewal. Calves were born, fences opened wider, and long days returned. He welcomed the work. His body moved with familiar rhythm, but his mind felt lighter than in years past. He no longer felt like he was simply getting through days. He felt present in them. He continued marking safe paths near the river, even helping others understand when it was best to wait and when it was safe to cross. Travelers passed through now and then, and he offered guidance without hesitation. Some thanked him, some didn't. That no longer mattered. Helping had become natural, not something he measured. One evening, as the sun dipped low, he sat on the porch and watched the land stretch out before him. The same land he had worked his whole life, yet now it felt deeper, fuller. He realized something important then. His life had not changed because of one dramatic event, but because of one simple decision made with care. On the other side of the land, she stood with her people as spring ceremonies were prepared. It was a time of reflection and gratitude, a moment to honor survival and renewal. She participated quietly as she always had, but those close to her noticed a deeper calm in her presence. She had changed too. Not in her values or her strength, but in her understanding of connection. She now saw how moments between strangers could shape the path ahead without binding it. She carried no expectation of seeing the rancher again. That was not the purpose of what they shared. What mattered was what remained. She often walked near the river now, never careless, always aware. She taught younger ones to read the land, to listen before acting. When asked why she spoke so firmly about water, she told them simply that nature did not warn loudly, but it always warned honestly. One afternoon, while gathering near higher ground, she paused and looked across the distance. Far away she saw movement, a rider near the river's bend checking the bank. She did not know for certain if it was him. The land was wide and many people traveled through it. She did not wave. She did not call out. She smiled softly and continued on. That moment felt complete, even without confirmation. As the months passed, both lives continued forward, full but not crowded. The rancher hosted neighbors more often now, sharing meals, exchanging help. The house felt less like a place of isolation and more like a place of welcome. She took on more responsibility within her community, guiding others with patience. Her words carried weight not because they were loud, but because they were thoughtful. Neither spoke the other's name often. They did not hold onto the past tightly. Instead, they allowed it to inform the present. One day, heavy rain returned, though not like before. The river rose slightly but stayed within its banks. The land held strong. The changes made, the awareness gained, all worked together quietly. The rancher stood by the river that day, watching water move smoothly over stones. He thought about how easily that moment could have gone differently months ago, how close everything had come to harm. He felt grateful, not relieved, but grateful. She, too, watched the rain fall from a safe distance. She felt no fear, only respect. The river was no longer an enemy or a threat. It was simply part of life, powerful but honest. That evening, both looked toward the sky as clouds cleared and stars appeared again. The same stars, seen from different places, under the same wide sky. They would never need to explain what that meeting meant. It had already done its work. Sometimes life did not bring people together to stay. Sometimes it brought them together to remind them who they were. And in that quiet truth, both found peace. The river flowed on, carrying no memory but leaving change behind.